After some cleaning and covered some of the original primer in the bottom of the car. I mean, obviously my primer doesn't match, but you know, I'm not going to sweat small details on the driver, so it's not a 1,000-point concours restoration. We're just trying to clean it up and make it nice. But you know, there's the color of the original primer in the bottom of the car. I now have primer applied to the tank area, the rear subframe, the wheel wells, and I put 2 coats of primer on it. I brushed the primer on, I didn't spray it on. So I got a pretty good application. And I also have primer applied up past the front spring perches. I feel pretty good about how this area cleaned up. I think it looks pretty nice, and it'll be a pretty nice area to work in once I start reassembling the back of the car. You can see that I have the primer applied up past the front spring perches, and you know, the primer's still wet in this video. Applying the primer with a brush, I know it's going to leave me some brush streaks, but I'm not too concerned about it being on the bottom of the car. Primarily concerned about getting it sealed up, coated, and you know, if you take a look under the car, it's still going to look pretty nice. Now that I have the fuel tank area finished on the bottom of the car, I'm going to come in and do a little bit of work in the trunk. I'm going to patch up a bunch of these holes with some fiberglass, and I have no idea what all these holes are in this floor pan, but I don't need them, so I'm going to cover them up. To repair the area that rusted through in the trunk pan, on the inside of the trunk here, I'm going to use fiberglass mat. Now, fiberglass mat, once you get it saturated with resin and it cures, it's really strong. Well, I have my resin, I have my hardener, I have a cheap paintbrush, and I cut off a Coke can to use as a mixing cup. And I'll mix up a batch of resin, about what I think I'll need for the fiberglass mat to repair that area in the pan. And a little bit extra to apply on the cloth patches covering the holes in the trunk pan. And when applying the hardener, I don't have a method or a certain number of drops. It's kind of an experimentation. It depends on the atmosphere, how warm it is. You know, my garage is probably in the low 60s, so I'm going to put a little extra in, and that'll help it set up. If it's real cold, you might actually have to use a space heater to get the resin to set up. I mix the hardener in real well with the resin, making sure I do this when I apply the resin. I know that it's all going to set up and I'm not going to have any areas that won't harden. When you first start applying the resin to the mat will want to move around on you until the mat is saturated with resin, where the resin will tack the mat down to the metal. It kind of behaves that way. But once you get it saturated, you can start working it, and it'll behave itself a lot better. I'm just pushing the resin through the mat. Make sure I have it completely saturated. You don't want any dry areas in your mat, so you want to be certain that everything is saturated with resin. Once the mat is saturated, you can start working out the bubbles. And just like fiberglass cloth, the mat is a weave. It's a much coarser weave, but it'll bend around corners, and you just got to work it a little bit. Once I have the mat laying down the way I like, I then take my brush and use a stippling motion to tuck the mat down around all the surface details. And by doing this, once the mat hardens, all the surface detail will come right through the mat. I applied resin to the fiberglass cloth patches covering the holes in the trunk. Well, I have the trunk coated with truck bed liner, and to get it ready for spatter paint, here's the repair we did in the where it rusted through. And I think once the spatter paint is over the top of it, it'll look pretty good. As I move forward working on the bottom of the car, I'm going to have to figure out what to do with all these holes in the floor pan. Now, I have no idea what these holes are for. Some of these holes are very regular in shape, so they look like they're factory holes. Some of them are obviously drilled, but I'll have to figure out what to do. I'll either get plugs for them or patch them. I can't just leave them open to the elements, though. I have to do something with them. Well, that's it for part 14. I'm moving forward slowly, but I am making progress. So I'll just keep plugging away at it. Thank you for watching. I should have another update in a couple weeks. And just keep on trucking.